Mr. President, the for-profit college and university industry is the most heavily, federally subsidized, profit-making private business in America, bar none. Most of these for-profit colleges and universities, like the University of Phoenix, Kaplan, and others, have decided that they want to tap into our federal treasury for anywhere up to 90 or 95% of all the revenue that comes through their universities and schools. There's no other business in America so dependent on a federal subsidy as for-profit colleges and universities. And what happens? Well, the federal treasury sends money to the students who apply to these schools in the form of grants and loans. The money is then transferred to the school, and the student has a debt that they have to cope with when it comes to the money that's borrowed from the federal government. Well, what happens in those circumstances where the school goes out of business? We saw it with Corinthian last year, one of the largest for-profit colleges and universities, and we just saw it 2 weeks ago with a group called ITT Tech. Here's what happens. Students have debt incurred at these for-profit schools like ITT Tech, and they are approached by the Department of Education, which offers them two options. The first option, if you were a student at the school 120 days before it went out of business, you have a choice. You can keep your credit hours that you earned at ITT Tech and the debt incurred in earning them, or walk away from both. Also, if you happen to have been defrauded by these schools, you have something called defense of repayment. If they misled you about the courses you were going to take, how much they would cost, what kind of loans were available to you, what kind of job you might have after graduation, then you too can raise that as a defense and literally walk away from credit hours and debt. That is an option that's being made to some 35,000 to 40,000 ITT Tech students. But there's another aspect to this we should not overlook. These schools do not just exploit students who are fresh out of high school or coming from some other place. They unfortunately defraud veterans. Veterans using GI Bill benefits at ITT Tech have been unfairly affected by this company's practices and now its closure and bankruptcy. ITT Tech has for years been a major recipient of GI Bill benefits. According to the 2014 report by Senator Tom Harkin's Help Committee, ITT Tech was the third largest recipient in 2012-2013, receiving $161 million in GI Bill funds. When it closed earlier this month, an estimated 7,000 veterans were enrolled at the school that has now gone out of business. Not only have these veterans used up part, or in some cases all, of their limited GI Bill education benefits, some of them relied on VA housing assistance to pay their rent and afford a place to live for themselves and their families. Veterans can only receive this housing stipend if they're enrolled in a school that qualifies for GI Bill benefits. So the closure of ITT Tech has put these veterans and their families at risk of being unable to afford their current housing, disrupting their lives. I support a bipartisan bill introduced by my colleagues, Senator Blumenthal and Tillis, a bipartisan bill to reinstate GI Bill education benefits in certain cases and give the Secretary of the VA the authority to temporarily extend housing benefits to vets, including those who attended ITT Tech. This bill, called the Veterans Education Relief and Restoration Act, was included in a larger bipartisan VA reform package, which I hope the Senate will still take up this year. But the closure of ITT Tech makes the need to pass this bill urgent. I urge my colleagues to join me in passing this legislation. And I urge them to stop and reflect on the fact that these for-profit schools are exploiting students and families, members of the military and their families, and veterans across the United States. Why, in good conscience, are we allowing this to continue? It is time for us to put some standards of conduct on this for-profit university industry that has taken so much money from our federal treasury, from $25 to $30 billion a year. These heavily subsidized crony capitalist operations are a disgrace. 10% of the students out of high school go to for-profit colleges and universities. 40% of all the student loan defaults are the students at these for-profit colleges and universities. Their tuitions are outrageously high, their diplomas are outrageously worthless, and many students and innocent people pay a heavy price. I will close with a story about one of them that I represent. Laura Cotton is one of those students who was misled by ITT Tech. She's a single mom in Oak Lawn, Illinois, working part-time. She saw the come on advertising of ITT Tech, had a lot of conversations with their recruiters about their great programs and the jobs she would get with an ITT Tech degree. She says they never bothered to talk to her about what it was going to cost and how she was going to pay for it. She ended up enrolling in an online criminal justice program. According to Laura, most of the courses had nothing to do with her program of study. ITT Tech would just send her paperwork to sign, more loans, federal and private. She ended up dropping out of ITT Tech when she finally added up all the money that they had enticed her to borrow. Laura has a debt of $98,000 to ITT Tech and nothing, no degree, nothing to show for it. In a letter she sent me, Laura wrote, quote, "My American dream of home ownership, purchasing a new car, giving my kids an education has suffered because my credit is now shot." I wish Laura's story was unique. I wish that more members of the Senate and Congress would sit down and talk to people just like her who have been victims of these for-profit colleges and universities. When are we going to accept our responsibility to clean up this shameful industry? Mr. President, I yield the floor.